Or do you want me to phone John?
I think we can ask our staff to do that.
Okay.
But I think we should start the meeting rolling. We've got 2 items.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, cool. Okay, let me know when I can start.
Oh, they called you on?
Hi, you can go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to ADP meeting held today, July 22nd, 2021. First, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place digitally on the Squamish Nation traditional territory. Second, I'd like to do a quick roll call if I may. I've got to read out I don't have the digital procedural notes in front of me, but essentially we don't need a yay, we just need a nay to any votes. If you get disconnected, please let one of us know. There'll be a phone number to call in if you do get disconnected, which I believe someone will put in the chat. Okay, and then I'll do a quick roll call. 80 minutes. Okay. Kareem? Yeah. Okay. Do we have Julian? No Julian.
David, Julian's calling in for the second item.
Julian's calling in for the second item.
That's right.
But he's not attending for the first.
Correct.
Okay, Julian. Carlos, I don't see Carlos anywhere.
Carlos will not be attending today.
Okay. Brent, I see Brent. Amy. Don't see Amy. Farzan, I see Farzan. Luke, yeah, Otis.
Yep.
I see Luke. Who else? John, we don't have. Catherine. See Catherine? Yeah. Sarah. I don't think no Sarah. And Christina. I see Christina there. Yeah. Think that's it. Think I've got everyone there. Okay. Start this meeting. Could I have someone move to adopt the agenda that we currently have? Okay, Brent first and a second. Farzan, so first. Okay, thank you. Carried. Next item would be the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any discussion or any comments or amendments anyone would like to make for that? No? Perfect. Good. Okay. I can't remember if we have to vote to adopt them.
We'll need a motion to adopt, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Motion to adopt. Can I have someone to... I don't have my notes, so I'm sorry. Brent, and then seconded by Kareem. Excellent. Okay. And now for the first item of business. Let me just double check. Okay, would be DP 000564 for Waterfront Landing 3A. Hand it over to the planner in charge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Great. My name is Carrie Hamilton. I'm a planner at the District of Squamish. And I'm presenting to you today a development permit for Phase 3A for Waterfront Landing. And in your report, you can kind of see a larger site plan photo of that. And I've highlighted that the location of of 3A, and it's in between 2A and 3C and 3B, which this advisory design panel has probably previously looked at and commented on. This project in 3A has not been to the advisory design panel, and staff have provided a bit of a detailed report with a number of comments just around different items that I'll go through briefly here. And if you want any more information, just to dive into the report, there's also visuals in the report as well to kind of complement what I'm speaking to. So one of the comments is around connectivity. In the sub-area plan for Waterfront Landing, there were a number of trails that were detailed on the site plan map. And in this particular phase, just the alignment of the trails have changed. And so we're just seeking the advisory design panel's comments on those changes. And I provided just some detail around what those look like. We are looking for comments regarding building color and building materials. There is in DPA 13 guidelines, speaks to the need for kind of consistency, but also to have each neighborhood have their own kind of unique feel and diversity. So trying to find that balance. It looks like they're using very consistent materials to the other phases. However, this particular phase is using a bit less color, and they are consistent. They are also providing the same red color that is consistent in other phases. They've also proposed some buildings have color on one side of the building and not on the other. And so staff is just looking for some comments from the committee around those particular pieces. We are also looking for comment around the ground-oriented design. This is a guideline in DPA 13 that states that there should be main access to all of these units from the muse areas, which are usually the parks or the internal pathway systems. And in this particular case, we're finding that buildings 7, 6, and 1 do not offer that entrance from the muse area. And we'd like to get the panel's comments around that. The other noticeable difference is just the decrease in fenestration and windows at the ground level as well, because a lot of these units are tighter and narrower. The garages are extending all the way through, so you're not really having livable space at that ground floor, and therefore the windows are quite smaller and higher up. Diverse building form and size and tandem parking. So in DPA 13, we talk about the need for diverse building forms and sizes. And in this case, the developer is trying to propose smaller units to address a need for the market's needs for smaller units right now. And in this case, what has happened is that there's in building 7, 6, and 1, they are providing 2 tandem parking stalls within the garage, where all other phases they've actually provided 1 within the garage and 1 outside the garage. And in staff's review of this type of design, it usually causes parking problems and challenges with parking, as when there's definitely not garage, or when there's not garage space for storage provided in those units. So we just would love to hear the committee's panel's comments just around this balance of storage space and parking, and also this need to accommodate kind of smaller unit sizes, which is what the development is trying to achieve with building 7, 6, and 1. Car share. In CD 40, we do allow for car share stalls to be approved in lieu of 5 stalls. However, we have received notice that we have too many in this area, and that car share isn't supported by the supported car share in the District of Squamish, and wanting to know what the staff seeking what ADP's recommendations on the car share direction is for Phase 3A, provided a little bit of background as to what we've agreed to in other phases when this issue has come up. Active park use. There is in the DPA 13 guidelines, we did it says to support a creation of active play areas. And in keeping with different park uses in each of these different phases, in this particular one, they're proposing more of a seating, communal gathering spaces, and aren't particularly providing any kind of form of like play equipment. And just wanted to see if the panel had any comments around that, the way that they are designing this play area. We had some comments around lighting. In this particular phase, they're proposing a lot of uplighting in the trees. This was something that they had proposed in phase 3C and B, which is where that commercial center was. But something that we staff are feeling it may not be fully appropriate for a residential area, and would love to get some comments around the proposed lighting plan that they have. And the last two comments are more on stormwater and sustainability. DPA 13 have a number of guidelines, and you'll find that in the table that's provided in your report. And would just love to have to hear any of the panel's comments just around how this application could meet some of those guidelines. And then the last one is balcony size and use. In DPA 13, it supports the design of porches or balconies with sufficient size to support seating areas and functional use by the occupants. And staff have noted that in this particular phase, the balconies have been reduced to 6 feet, whereas other phases they've been proposing 8 feet. So there's a reduction in there, and just wanted to know if that impacts functionality in any way. That is all for staff, and I'll pass it over to the architectural team to present the project.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. And can I just make a note that I think John has joined? Okay. I think you're muted, John. Yeah, okay.
This is not the usual computer that I do this on, so thanks for being with me. I'll just let the presentation continue, and then when we get around to comments, I'll do a very brief roll call, just because I'm not able to note exactly who is missing here or might be here. Anyway, carry on, and I'll do that after.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so I guess I can jump in here. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mark Blackwood. I'm one of the principals at Acoustics Architecture. I am noticing on my...
Sorry, do you mind if I just do a quick introduction on behalf of BOSA before I pass it off to you?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, sorry about that.
I'll also just note that, okay, it just popped up, so we have screen sharing abilities now. Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and your attention today. I promise to keep my introduction brief and allow time for Mark, as well as our landscape architect, to speak to the design, but I did want to introduce myself. I'm Paige Ritchie. I've been the development manager working on Waterfront Landing now for about a year. I can honestly say it's one of the most unique and exciting projects I've had the honor of working on in my short career. And I'm excited to be here today to speak to the merits of Phase 3A. Carrie did a great job of orienting us on where Phase 3A sits on our site. But I was hoping to add a bit more color to that context by outlining where we are from a master plan perspective. So our first phase of 88 townhomes is fully occupied, and homeowners are enjoying their homes, creating a real sense of community. Every time I'm on site, I see children playing at the playground, and we're working with our property manager to ramp up our community garden plots, so that's great to see as well. Phase 2 has officially received occupancy on its first 8 out of a total of 134 townhome units, and we're excited to see homeowners completing there. Our 2 rental buildings, Phase 3B and Phase 3C, will most likely start construction in the next few months, and the grading and invasive species removal has started in our North Park, which is adjacent to all of these residential phases, after receiving its environmental DP earlier this year. Phase 3A is made up of 65 townhomes and will be the last townhome phase on the north half of our site. So we're really excited to see it progress through approvals, as we see it as kind of the final puzzle piece in what will soon be a growing, thriving community. The design of these homes has progressed from Phase 1 to 2 and now to 3A, providing a variety yet unique design for each phase while having elements that tie them all together as a community. Waterfront Landing, or Sea and Sky as we like to call it, has always been envisioned as a community in the heart of it all, with access to nature, on-site amenities, and downtown Squamish. We're growing a community where multi-generational living is not only possible but planned for. BOZA, our architects from Acoustics, and our landscape architects from LOSI have been amenable to working with staff on a number of items that have progressed our design to what you've seen in our package today. The average townhome size went from about 1,400 square feet in phase 2 to about 1,200 square feet in 3A, with some homes as small as 1,059 square feet. We see phase 3A as an opportunity to supply a market demand, which Carrie touched on, that also aligns perfectly with the goals and intent of Squamish's OCP, which supports the community vision for smart growth by supporting the development of compact, denser neighborhoods to reduce infrastructure networks, maintenance costs, but also support a variety of multifamily housing types, sizes, and tenures, which will support housing affordability and accommodate a range of household types and life stages. This feeds back into our vision for multi-generational living by introducing new, smaller, more affordable unit types for families, couples, or individuals looking to purchase something larger than a condo but can afford some of the more sizable townhomes being offered on this and many other sites in Squamish. So now, thank you for that. I'll pass things back over to Mark from Acoustics.
Great, thanks very much, Paige. I'm just going to try and share my screen here. Let's see if this will work. Okay, just confirming everyone has that on their screen. Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much again. I'm Mark Blackwood from Acoustics Architecture, and we've been working with BOSA on this project since the early days of the project, and you know, to date have kind of realized phase 1 of the development, phase 2, which is currently under construction, and phase 3 and 3B and 3C, which are the rental apartment buildings that were recently approved and will be beginning construction shortly. So phase 3, kind of phase 3A, which we're discussing today, kind of completes this this precinct of the master plan. As many of you know, I'll go through this quite quickly, just sort of for context. The site is located in Squamish, you know, adjacent to the Mamquam Blind Channel. And sort of a little bit more zoomed in here, you know, we have the Squamish Chief to the bottom right there, the Mamquam Channel kind of running adjacent to the whole waterfront landing development, and then obviously downtown to the other side. Just for some further context, so the Mamquam Channel is to the right here in blue, and part of the overall community. It envisions an extensive kind of what's called sort of the North Park right now, kind of adjacent to the Mamquam Channel and kind of buffering the development, you know, to phase 3A, which is kind of in this zone right here. So phase 2 kind of starts to define the edge of the North Park. Phase 3A will kind of continue that definition, and then phase 3B and C will kind of complete that edge as well. So just sort of highlighting this as a very kind of you know, beneficial amenity to the overall community, and will offer a lot of opportunities for kind of outdoor amenity and play, you know, for residents of Waterfront Landing and beyond. And then just sort of further down on the site, you know, the master plan also envisions kind of the larger community of, you know, a commercial center or village down by the water. The idea of connecting this development across to downtown and obviously kind of, a really valuable pedestrian connection in terms of accessing amenities in the larger Squamish area. So phase 3A, which we're talking about, will just be kind of just off to the left here. Just a little touch on land uses. The diagram here essentially illustrates the various uses, red being more the mixed use type zones. The more peach color is sort of more of the mid-rise type developments, and then the yellow is more sort of the low townhouse kind of duplex style of development. And then obviously sort of a lot of mixed use down by the commercial area, and then the bridge connection, which comes across into downtown. As mentioned, part of the master plan kind of envisioned how connectivity is going to work through the site. So with each phase, we're considering the connectivity, both kind of major connection points through the site to the village, but also all the tertiary ones that kind of weave its way through the various phases of development. And we'll be touching on that in more detail of how that's been addressed in phase 3A here. So just for orientation, we have phase 1, phase 2 currently under construction, and then the topic of today, phase 3A, which is this smaller parcel right here. And then the future apartment buildings will be in this zone. From the early days of the master plan, there were essentially kind of four quadrants kind of envisioned. One is kind of the woods, essentially, and that comprises of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And the idea is that each one of these neighborhoods would have some distinction in terms of their architectural character, but ensured that they kind of speak together as kind of a united and a cohesive community. And then there's additional neighborhoods where we have the Bluffside East and Bluffside West, which again kind of create opportunities to kind of create uniqueness both in kind of the architectural form and character. But again, the anticipating ways to make sure that the community holds together, both in terms of form, character, connectivity, and public outdoor space. And then the fourth being the landing, which would kind of comprise a lot of the commercial village and both commercial, residential, a large amenity building, which is planned for this location right here at the heart of it all. So there's kind of some rationale between how the overall community is intended to come together and kind of thinking about different precincts within the overall site plan. So this slide here really just kind of describes those various precincts, and what we're talking about here is the Woods neighborhood, which comprises of phase 1, 2, and 3. So yeah, it really touches on kind of a lot of the things that I just spoke about, but also some of the design influences of the Woods neighborhood is this idea of kind of the former sawmill, lumber and log storage, and kind of that slightly more kind of industrial kind of aesthetic that maybe goes along with a previously kind of more industrial site. So before we kind of go forward here, I just want to take one step back and just sort of illustrate some of the work that's been happening with staff over the past little while to address some of the concerns. So this is kind of a plan iteration that was kind of, one version ago, if you will. And as mentioned, part of the concern was, some of the tandem parking stalls and kind of trying to reconcile, the number of tandem stalls within a garage. And to that end, the plan has been adjusted. So for example, building number 8 and 9, we've reduced the number of units by 2. And as we go through the slides here, you'll see the revised plan where we've introduced kind of wider side-by-side units at both ends of building 9 and both ends of building 8, which allow for side-by-side garages. The other plan adjustment that was made is an adjustment to the internal strata road, which now allows full-length driveways for buildings 5, 8, and 9. So that effectively means the only units that have interior tandem garages are buildings 1, 6, and 7. The remaining units, you can see these ones already had full-length driveways. So that was one plan change that you'll see, especially when we get to the landscape plan. The other comment was kind of trying to improve connectivity, and specifically this pathway here, which was kind of ending at a bit of a intersection of the strata roads. And what we've since done is modified the plan, and landscape will speak to this in more detail, but created a more direct connection to the pocket park here, which allows for good connectivity through to the North Park. Other than that, we're more or less staying in line with the intended connectivity of the overall master plan. We've maintained the multi-use trail that kind of runs along this edge, which connects the greater community to the North Park and acts as the boundary between 3A, our site, and the adjacent phase 3B and 3C. And each one of those, along that multi-use path, we have fronting townhomes to really create a nice street edge and activation of that multi-use trail through visible front doors and making sure that that's an attractive pedestrian experience. And then on top of that, kind of the major connection from the commercial plaza on the 3B and 3C site, connecting us through to the internal green space of this site, and an additional two connections through to the North Park. So I think a lot of good pedestrian permeability is in place, and so that's this area here was one area that we've improved. The other item I wanted to speak about is one of the variances that is contemplated here is a reduction in the driveway length for these buildings. We've worked with staff and kind of moved these buildings so they're 4 feet away from the curb, essentially, which I think works well in the sense that it's narrow enough that there's no risk of people trying to try and force a car in there sideways. It's not possible. So we're keeping the cars in the garages and making sure that there's no kind of messiness in terms of cars overhanging onto the strata roads. The way the bylaw reads is your driveways can either be 0 meters or 6 meters. And I think the alternative of going to kind of a 0 meter setback to the street just really is problematic in terms of creating an edge that's and a streetscape that's attractive. At least with a little bit of setback from the street, we can mitigate the idea of people parking, but also allow for some articulation and some attractive landscaping along that edge. So just highlighting that pedestrian connectivity, and you'll see this one has been modified to kind of create connection through here. That'll show up better in the landscape plan. I've already really spoken to this one. The other point just to discuss is kind of color distribution. And as mentioned, we are carrying forward somewhat of a similar color palette to the previous phases. But again, that's kind of goes back to this idea of kind of creating connectivity in the woods neighborhood. However, creating some distinction as well, particularly in the roof forms for this development, where we're going from a more symmetrical gable form to asymmetrical peak or kind of sawtooth type of roof form, as you can kind of see in the top image here, where the peaks are kind of offset to one side. And then kind of because it is a smaller development, we also didn't want to kind of overdo it in terms of the number of color variations, and at some point we begin to kind of lose the kind of the architectural intent of the design. However, ensuring that there's kind of adequate distribution in terms of, in this case, kind of the pop of the red corrugated metal, which has turned out very well on the previous phases, and then kind of contrasting that against kind of a slightly more muted color palette of the kind of the lighter corrugated metal here and the darker corrugated metal on the lower image. So there's somewhat of a an inverse of each other. And then to complement that, some accents of kind of painted hardy, which kind of evoke this kind of more of a wood toned type material. So that's just kind of touching on the color distribution piece. And kind of going back to the architectural influences, some of the influences from the previous phases, phase 1 precedents here, phase 2 precedents here, and then in 3A, you can see we're really kind of looking at these kind of asymmetrical forms as a point of distinction for the phase 3A development. And also you can kind of notice in some of these images, and it was sort of touched on, that we're using kind of slightly smaller windows, but I think the idea of a slightly smaller window, which still allows adequate daylight, but the smaller proportion creates a bit more of a kind of a punched feel of punched window openings that we're kind of going for in this phase. So just to further touch on some of the design evolution, phase 1, the gable roofs that are symmetrical, was sort of a predominant feature on phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2, a big distinction, from the previous phase was sort of the larger carve out of kind of windows and paneling. And now in this phase 3A development, you can begin to see sort of these layered offset gables, carrying through some of the industrial language of the corrugated metal and kind of the punched openings, and then introducing more of kind of a panelized siding, which is kind of a new, sort of a new material that we're using a bit more extensively on this phase. So just similar comparisons of how the design is evolving, and I think it's it's quite clear that there is distinction, but there's also sort of some cohesiveness in terms of these different communities are kind of residing side by side, and not necessarily wanting them to be sort of too desperately different. One of the other points that was raised was the buildings 1, 6, and 7, which are adjacent to the Central Park, and just kind of some concern of whether there's enough kind of feeling or sort of frontage or sense of entry off of the park. And I think just wanted to show this image to sort of illustrate that the idea is that this space would very much be treated like a front entrance, although albeit the formal entry maybe it is more directly from the lane side. And some of the moves we did here was to ensure that there's sort of still a door, still some glazing to sort of soften that lower level, even though there is sort of a garage behind it. And then also sort of creating distinct breaks in the deck. Other buildings, you'll see that the deck runs continuous. So what this did was it allowed us to kind of create sort of breaks in the facade, so we end up with a rhythm that's a little bit more indicative of kind of a more fronting building, in this case onto the park space. And then on the opposite side, we can sort of begin to see with kind of the reduced driveway length, we can still kind of create a transition from the front door to the curb edge. As I'm sure you can understand, if we were in a zero condition where we had zero driveway apron, we would pretty much be stepping out of the front door onto the strata lane, which I believe is a bit problematic. And then just some various images of various buildings and how kind of various material palettes are being handled. And I think in many instances, there's a fair amount going on in terms of variation. It does vary from building to building, but I think I guess I'm sort of cautioning against too much additional color, as I think we would lose the intent of the overall design. So this is a view of Building 5, the rear of Building 5, where the color palette is a little bit more muted, but still kind of varied in terms of siding color tone and some pops of color. This one here, sorry, just go back. We have building number 2. So this sort of illustrates the darker corrugated metal and the introduction of sort of a more of a painted fiber cement, kind of defining the ends or kind of the field of the building, and then really using the corrugated metal as sort of the pop-out feature. Just the rear. Just sort of various color palettes. I'll just scroll through these. This one illustrates, so this is a view of, building number 9. So this illustrates where we've added the wider units. So you can see the side-by-side garage, full-length driveways. So now we're sort of, trying to address some of those concerns over sort of too much tandem parking. And as mentioned, sort of the housing diversity piece, there's a fair number of unit plans. And again, they sort of range from that kind of just over 1,000 to kind of 1,500 square feet. And the idea is, as Paige mentioned, to sort of offer a smaller unit type to, sort of address some of the market concerns, and also, create, a varying degree of kind of 2 and 3 bedroom and den type units. So all these are in your package. And then you can see here, these are the only tandem units, which are the units in buildings 1, 6, and 7. So 2 parking stalls at the lower level, and then the entrance off of the strata lane. So I'm just going to scroll forward quickly before landscape jumps in, just to highlight the connectivity piece that I was talking about. So as we saw in the previous plan, this pathway was kind of extending to this intersection here. That's since been modified to kind of come in front. So there's an existing pump station that's here. So now we're kind of keeping people off of the Strata Road and then just having one point of crossing across to the park, and then that creates a nice convenient access out to the North Park here. In this version, you can now see sort of the wider units on the ends of building 9 and building number 8, so side-by-side garages. And now you can see all of these buildings have full-length driveways. Buildings 6, 7, and 1, you can see those now have very much kind of reduced driveway aprons, which are kind of more or less non-existent, being sort of 4-ish feet. So that addresses kind of concerns about anyone kind of trying to sort of park in those locations. And then that puts the the decks on the park side, which kind of creates some nice overlook and kind of eyes on the public park space in the middle. So yeah, just wanted to highlight those bits on the site plan. I'll go back and maybe let landscape take over.
Thanks, Mark. Mike Enns here from Loci Landscape Architecture. We're working with Akistics and Bosa also on 3B and C. So some of the thematics and approaches that we did for 3B and C have carried over to the neighboring site in 3A. So very quickly, Mark touched on some of these ideas and sort of design considerations, but very quickly, obviously, this is we want to promote the coastal iconic rainforests and mountains, the connectivity. Mark talked a lot about that, and the permeability of the site, which is really good, and how it ties into the neighboring sites. From a landscape perspective, materiality, wanting to use local materials, reusing boulders when we can. Obviously, natural materials, not only for gathering spaces, but also sort of informal play. And really trying to establish this neighborhood as its own community with some components of the public realm that really encourage gathering and possible events year round, and also looking at opportunities for rainwater management as well on the site. So, Mark, if you just keep going through there. Mark did a good job highlighting connectivity, permeability, lots of options to move around. Generally, the approach to landscape was lush, evergreen, native planting palettes in between the building masses in and around the muse, and sort of the public realm is anchored by the three sort of key spaces: the central greens and the pocket park and the little forest walk down in the south edge. And we talk a bit more about those later on. And obviously the perimeter aspect ties into the neighboring waterfront park, as well as the Greenway Trail, and allowing a good amount of privacy between those public spaces and the private units, but also permeability through those sites with lots of different access points. Next slide, Mark.
Maybe I'll just highlight as well, just while we're here, Mike. We have a staired access to the park here, but one of the important elements of the site plan and the multi-use path was an accessible entrance into the site at this lower portion as well. So kind of ensuring that we have a good accessible path of travel, from the phase 3B and C sites and the North Park into the 3A development.
Yeah, and to that end, just back up just a sec, Mark. Yeah, from 3B and C at that number 2, right on the east side there at the top of that grand staircase, that's actually connected to sort of the middle key pathway that connects to the plaza space in 3B and C. So there's this linear pedestrian procession coming from the east. You get to the top of the stairs, it's this grand staircase going down, and it opens up into the central sort of social heart of the site, and you continue through to that pathway and pocket park on the west side and out to the waterfront park. So there's a lot of intuitive wayfinding. The way this is all set up in the public realm, I think, creates a very easy place to move around, and a lot of visual and physical permeability. Planting approach, very quickly, in general, very heavy dose of native planting, a lot of evergreen material, a layered approach on the perimeter. So we have a little bit of color and seasonal interest, but that is layered with the fencing and hedge and privacy treatments. And in the internal parts of the site, that's where we have most of our, and you can see in the shade of yellow, that's where we have more of our accent planting and year-round interest in color that changes with texture as the seasons go by. But really a very strong foundation planting approach for the site. Plant list. In general, there's a good mix of native shrubs, some hardy shrubs that do very, very well in the region. We have some drought tolerant plants as well, and also there's this has been vetted for essentially bear proofing, so most of the plants here won't attract unwanted visitors in and around the site. So that gives you an idea of our palette, but a good mixture of deciduous trees and conifers with evergreen shrubs and your perennial accents and ornamental grasses and such. Quick, so just a couple blow-ups of some of the components of the public realm, the amenity spaces. This is that reconfigured pump station area that basically takes you from the south edge of the site and heading west along that pathway and connecting to the waterfront park to the north. So as Mark said, the pump station is there. The garbage recycling kiosk was shifted to the right so we could have the pathway come through along the internal street. And we thought this was a very cool opportunity to create a small little forest walk with picnic and seating amongst a heavy treed area with naturalized features such as logs. And so a neat little amenity as you proceed through these little pathways and out along the west side to the waterfront park. Along that, if you keep heading west and north, you'll come across the Pocket Park, and this is really another little sort of jewel along the pathway. That it's a fairly unprogrammed, flexible green space, open lawn with perimeter seating, heavy dose of native planting, and really just a place for picnicking. To bring your pets or bring your little kids and just just have fun and sort of unprogrammed flex play, if you will, but nothing permanent and no fixed playground equipment in this area. And then moving along to the central area. So this is sort of the social heart of the site. On the west side, there's a built-up mound. On the far west side, there's actually a little proposed little retention rainwater retention sort of seasonal pond with some stepping over it and a little plaza in that. And then as you proceed eastwards, you go up this mound, and then you with a little lookout area that overlooks this sort of social area on the east side of this park with a little amphitheater, grass amphitheater, and there's a featured tree, some sitting opportunities in the perimeter, and that terminates with a covered picnic barbecue area and some signage, which is at the base of that grand staircase. So there's some connections on either side, and really this would serve as the social heart and perhaps event space for the immediate community. There's a east-west section through that central green with the rain garden detention area. And actually, I forgot to mention in the plan, along the edges of the mound, there would be a little rain garden, so it would capture some runoff down from the mound on either side and channel it to this area, and perhaps some interpretive signage. So use it as an immersive feature and also an educational tool. And then the mound and the lookout, and then an amphitheater down and some free play. So very much, it's really, no fixed playground. Carrie, you mentioned it. I think the approach here was just naturalized and let kids and people of all ages use the various elements. It's more of a natural, explorative approach to sort of recreational design, but keeping things fairly flexible and passive to have events on the east side, the open lawn area. Sorry, water treatment multis. Okay, so we've got a couple perimeter shots. I think the top left is the waterfront park frontage. So we've got our multi-use path, and I think Mark showed some 3D perspectives of how that transition is from public to private. So we have a layered approach with some plants, and deciduous trees and building up to the fence, and then obviously the private patio spaces internally. I think the bottom section is the grand staircase coming from 3B and C on your far right, with the landing up top and some seating and some signage, and then you proceed down to the central green commons areas. And I think the number 2 on the top right is another section through that Greenway Trail and the raise, or they step up to the townhome frontage. The townhomes are nicely nestled into that escarpment. Next slide. Furnishing palette. So again, naturalized material, stone, wood, durable. A lot of these materials have shown to be good choices and great success for the earlier phases, and phase 1 almost complete. So we're carrying over some of the materiality just for some continuity through the phases. Next slide, Mark. And lighting, Carrie, you did mention that that they're in terms of uplighting, so that has not been adjusted. And we certainly can eliminate some of the uplights, especially for a project like this. I think the main strategy is, you know, at the entries on the perimeter, make things illuminated, safe wayfinding throughout the site. I think especially on the main staircase coming down from the right. And I think in the landscape, it's probably best to take an approach where you just highlight, you know, certain groves of trees or certain landscape elements, but not inundate it with uplighting. So I agree with your comment there, and we welcome the, you know, any other comments with that. But that's our approach for now, is to reduce this and be a little bit more selective with the lighting. I think that might be it, but is that it, Mark?
Yeah, that's the last
Yeah.
slide.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Mark, we're all done there.
Yeah, that's great. Would you like me to leave the presentation up on the screen, or should I take it down?
Yeah, it's fine if it's up there.
Okay.
We're going to go on to questions now. So just before we do that, I just
John, I was just going to suggest that we did the roll call, and I could just tell you who's not here. Would that
Perfect.
be probably faster?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So the people that are not here are Carlos, Amy,
Okay.
and Sarah.
And Sarah.
And I believe the
Julian.
Julian is going to be
Julian's not
joining us
here.
for the second item, so he's not on this one.
Okay. Okay. That's great. Okay, thanks very much, Jonas.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will go on to questions, and I'll start with David. If that's okay with you, David?
Yeah, sure thing. Were there sidewalks in phases 1?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Were there any sidewalks around the development in phase 1 in previous phases?
Like around the perimeter of the site?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was part of the streetscape. There's a you know, the sidewalk on the public streets that kind of run around the perimeter.
Okay. How many units would you lose if you did provide adequate driveways?
Well, I think the main, so we've kind of adjusted, you know, buildings 5, 8, and 9. So it really puts the squeeze on kind of 7, 6, and 1. I think we have a building separation of about 25 feet right now at the pinch point. So, you know, rough math, if we're at 4 feet now and we got to get up to 20, so we're taking out 32 feet. You know, so, you know, you're more or less probably losing close to a whole building, I would suspect.
Yeah, so maybe 7 units
Mm-hmm.
out of 65. Okay. This is a bigger question. I mean, you've had the benefit of being able to see a couple of other phases get built out and actually used. Have you noticed have you learned any lessons from the way those ones were used that have been incorporated into this phase?
Yeah, I think, and maybe that in part might be a question for BOSA in terms of how kind of homeowners are kind of, you know, kind of giving feedback to them. But I think what's really in question right here is, you know, as it relates to driveways, it's kind of just these 3 buildings in the middle. And, you know, I think, you know, maybe part of the concern about sort of tandem garages is someone going to, you know, put one car somewhere else. And, you know, I think on this site, we've got, you know, we've kind of limited the driveway length. So, you know, hopefully that won't happen. I'd be surprised to see someone park in a 4-foot apron. And I think, you know, after that, it becomes a bit of a strata policing, you know, to make sure that, you know, the visitor stalls are indeed being used for that. We have, about half of the visitor stalls are accessible stalls, so I think that's a further deterrent that they're not going to be used by homeowners.
Yeah.
Just by visitors.
And then the last question I have really is for planning. I think it said that they're required to provide 12 visitor stalls. Are they providing that, or what is the confusion around the car share? Are they being? I don't see 12 visitor stalls.
I said you got cut off for a little bit of the question, but I think your question just is around the car share regulation. And so they are currently proposing to put a car share in this site in order to reduce the amount of visitor stalls that they are providing. So currently what you're seeing here is one car share for 5 of the visitor stalls.
Okay, and then the remaining, they've provided the remaining visitor stalls on the site.
Correct, and as Mike mentioned, or as was mentioned, is that the other remaining stalls, there's 5 accessibility stalls, so that leaves 2 that are open.
Okay. Perfect. That's all my questions at the moment. Thank you.
David, if I may, just to speak to your question about lessons learned from previous homeowners that we've applied to this phase. One of the key ones was unprogrammed outdoor space, because we did provide playground equipment on a lot of the outdoor spaces in earlier phases. That's one reason why we left this kind of open and flexible.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Paige.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, David. We'll go to Karim next, please.
Yes, thanks, Mark, for the presentation. A couple of quick questions. Buildings 3 and 4 have access to the plaza up on a higher level. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. So we have a 3-story face on this side here, and then it's a 2-story face on the 3B and 3C side.
Nice.
So they're basically those townhomes are negotiating one level of grade change.
Okay. The second question I had was regarding the pump station. I'm assuming that was a district requirement, and you really didn't have a choice in its location and sort of how much space it takes.
Yeah, that's correct, and it's actually built.
It's already built.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it for questions from me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karim. If we could please go to Brent.
Thanks, John, and thanks for the presentation, Mark and Mike. I had a question about just sort of trying to understand the grade here, and at the north side of the site is building 5, access same to the waterfront park and that pathways. Is there a grade change there, or is that at the same grade as the main floor?
Yeah, so these entries here are kind of more or less at grade. There'll be some variation in terms of a few steps here and there just to kind of negotiate kind of some undulations. But yeah, generally all the front entries for building 5, 8, and 9 just sort of come out to their front yard and flow out to the waterfront park.
Okay, great. And then is that an accessible ramp that is just to the right of building 5, the top of the screen?
That's correct. Yeah, because the multi-use path kind of meets the path at the waterfront park and then slowly rises up to kind of that, once we kind of hit here, we're about a story higher to the strata lane on the other side of building number 4. So we're able to sort of pull in the ramp at the kind of the lowest possible elevation to minimize how much grade change is kind of needed to be negotiated.
Okay. And then I have one more question about circulation between buildings 8 and 5, and hard to tell from this, but was there ever sort of pedestrian access explored through there, or looks like there's potentially something in there? Just wondering, yeah, sort of distance between those buildings and if sort of providing access for pedestrians was explored.
Right. It's in some respects, it is a very similar condition to this condition. I think, however, it was felt that, well, this one kind of comes through and creates the connection more to sort of these park spaces. And we've already got another connection point here and, excuse me, and another connection point up at the multi-use path that, those are pretty good spacing of connection points already.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have any other questions for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Christina, are you ready?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. I just have two questions. Just in reference to the active play question, is there another playground in proximity to this subdivision? Is there one in one of the other phases that's relatively close? Do you know?
Well, we've got, I know in phase 3 BC in the plaza, there's some active play in the plaza there. And I think there's a private daycare, I think, in 3BC. But Mark, maybe you can speak. I don't know the full design for that waterfront park or previous phases. So maybe Mark, I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I'm not directly involved in the design of the neighborhood of the North Park, but I think Paige, maybe you can kind of speak to the latest updates on that. But we included this slide just to sort of illustrate that there is an extensive park right adjacent with kind of various kind of programmed elements in it. I'm not sure, Paige, are you able to kind of speak to some of the programming there?
Yeah, so where your cursor was, that's exactly right, where there would be active play. And then there's opportunities for all ages at different locations throughout the park for different sort of activities.
So we're talking swing sets and things like that, climbers and other elements like that? Okay. And then the other question I have is the wood slat fence, was that utilized in any other phases or is that unique to this one?
That is being used in phase 2.
Phase 2, okay. And it's been successful in terms of maintenance?
Yeah, well, so phase 1 had kind of a solid paint, sort of the dark gray, and then sorry, I'm just going to scroll back to the site plan. And then on phase 2, we went with the solid painted kind of dark gray for the fencing. And then on the gates, it's not a stain. It is a solid, it is a solid paint essentially. We didn't want to kind of get into a condition where, the stain holds up for a year or two, and then they end up just kind of fading out and being a maintenance item for the strata. So we've kind of used sort of more of a solid paint on those gates, but still to give that kind of that sense of wood. There are a couple ones that are complete already on site. So, and they turned out quite nice.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Catherine, are you ready?
I'm ready, thanks.
Great.
I just had one or two questions. The trees along the west side of building 9, 8, and 5, are they, I don't know exactly what the distance is, but are they going to be providing shade and full shade or cooling for that front of the building?
You want to take that one?
I'm muted. Sorry, guys. I was just on mute. So the idea behind the trees, you're talking about the ones between the buildings and the park, right?
Yeah, I think they're outside the yards, but they're along there. So I'm just wondering if they provide any shading and cooling for those buildings.
They would for sure, and I think the detailed design will certainly select the appropriate. I mean, the idea being is that we want some shade, we want some privacy. We also don't want a wall of green because there is a park to the north. So, but they would for sure. Like, I think that's the general approach. And we sort of the patios design and materials are a little bit different from north facing patios versus south facing, and the materials were changed in still wood plant material, obviously. But certainly we want to, in private and public spaces, we want to give a combination of shady spots and sunny spots, for sure.
Okay, and then the trees along building 4, building 3 that are like, again, they're the south-facing aspects. Are those again deciduous trees, and will they also be large enough to provide cooling for the lower and upper story windows and the buildings?
That's the intent, and the intent, because this is the Greenway Trails, to have a larger tree along that specific corridor, and it's sort of mirroring on either side of 3B and C. But and we might, if we can, I'm just looking at the plan here. There might be some opportunities to sneak in a smaller tree. It gets a little bit tight between the Greenway Trail and the stairs that go up, just because the grade changed a little bit. But we certainly will try to maximize the amount of trees in there, just for that reason alone, just for shade and for protection, for solar protection against the house or against the townhome.
Okay. And if you guys looked into when you're looking at the lawn material or the sod that you're using, what are your considerations in choosing a particular type of sod, or have you looked at other like lawn alternatives? I'm just thinking about it looks like they're sodding along, I can't remember what it's called, like the access path, sort of south of buildings 6 and 7, and then in front of building, or behind, maybe it'd be behind building 2, where there's, yeah, that's the question. So just in areas that may not be play areas, but that are kind of adjacent areas.
Yeah, I think for this project, sod would be a good candidate, and it's more or less where we put it. So in a north-facing small patio, we're probably going to opt for, say, permeable pavers or pavels and gravel or something like that, or something that still has a permeable and absorptive quality to it, even if it's run off into the adjacent planting bed. But I think if you have a south-facing sod application, I think it should be fine here.
And if
In
you
terms of,
consider,
go ahead,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, as opposed to something like turf or something like that, I don't like an artificial turf or that. I don't think it's a candidate, but yeah.
I guess what I was getting at is there's some alternatives to the monoculture of, or monocrops of sod. There's different bee turfs, and there's also the meadow opportunities that I wondered if you considered that. Yeah, that was a question.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, especially, in a hot summer, if maybe we don't want to do all the mowing, I could see in the central area, that mound could maybe be a wildflower mix, and the rain garden's next to it. And maybe there's only one area that gets mowed, and that's sort of the amphitheater, the east side of that central park. But I know I agree with you. I think in detailed design, we'll look at different applications of, say, like a seed mix versus an actual turf. But yeah, no, that's a good observation.
Hey, thanks so much. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll go next to Luke, please.
Yeah. I actually don't have that many questions, because a couple of them might have been answered, but I had a question about to kind of further David's building 1, 7, and 6, the 4-foot space between the building and the road. I was just wondering if you've given any further consideration to even squeezing like an extra 2 foot out of there, just to give them a bit of a buffer between the road and the entryway, or is that still quite tight with the space you have available? I can't hear
You
it.
there?
Hello?
Someone on mute?
Mark might be muted or
I think
having trouble. But sorry, did you mean, Luke, another 2 feet, so to go from 4 to 6?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any ability to get to 6 foot, and if there's any consideration being given for, to maybe add some planting in there to deter people from parking right outside the garage door.
Yeah, so we've gone back and forth quite a bit on these driveways because if we are going as per the bylaw, it states 6 meters or no driveway at all. And so we were trying to get towards the closest to no driveway at all as we could, while keeping a design and having some planting in there. So to answer your question, we could go a bit longer on the driveway. It's possible, and we could definitely fit more planting in. It has been considered, but we're just trying to get as close to abiding by bylaw as possible.
Okay. The other one would be the color considerations that the planning asked us to comment on. A couple of the buildings on the rear were chosen to be a bit more of a muted palette. I was just wondering if there was any particular reasoning for that, and if any other colors had been considered at the rear.
Yeah, sorry, I got my I lost my mute button there, so I couldn't unmute myself. So yeah, so that was intentional. If I kind of go back to kind of a rear view, the idea is to really sort of make other, although this building is kind of seen in isolation, for example, and as you'll remember from the kind of the color distribution diagram where we're proposing kind of the pops of kind of red. The idea is to sort of make sure that those buildings really pop. I think if you begin to sort of populate the site with too many colors, you sort of lose that kind of aha kind of moment, or sort of that kind of special moment of kind of seeing these individual kind of buildings kind of pop up against sort of a slightly more kind of more neutral elevation, I guess you could say. But sort of making sure there's still some some different color tones there, some kind of smaller moves of kind of color pops as well. And I think once you get sort of the layering of kind of landscape and the life that people bring to their balconies, there quite quickly it becomes quite busy. So we didn't want to overdo it.
Okay, that's fine. That's all I have now, actually. Thanks. Yes.
Thanks, Luke, and we will go to Farzan next.
Right, thank you, John. Thank you, Mark, for presentation. Can you go back to the slide that shows the changes? Because I haven't been on the previous phases of the project. I don't really know the colors and material of the previous phases. Can you tell me what is the same as previous and what is changed?
Yeah, so maybe if we take if we take this slide, for example, back here, there we go. Okay. So yeah, top left here. So these were the phase 1 buildings. Phase 1 had kind of various colors of corrugated siding. So this particular building example was sort of the blue corrugated, and some other accents of kind of gray corrugated on some of the feature bump outs. And then most of the other kind of planes were kind of a painted lap hardy siding. So on phase 2, we carried through some of the obviously sort of some of the building form in terms of the gables, but introduced things like sort of reduced overhang, so it's more of a clipped gable end versus kind of a more generous overhang on this phase. Introduced a bit more kind of panel between windows to sort of create a bit more of a kind of a larger expression on the gable ends. And these ones here feature more of a board and batten siding versus the corrugated metal. And then as we move into phase 3, we kind of reintroduce a bit more of that corrugated metal, both in the red, the dark gray, and also sort of a very light gray color tone, depending on the color palette. And also in this phase, we're kind of introducing larger planes of painted fiber cement siding, kind of giving the building a little bit more of a cleaner contemporary look with kind of the punched openings that we were kind of going for in some of those precedent images. And then I think one of the more dramatic changes is the roof lines going to more of an offset gable.
So you had more changes in the third phase than the other ones because you had to change the profile of the roof and more fiber cement materials and different colors, right?
Yeah, so
C is only for the corrugated metal, as I understand.
well, we do have areas of kind of lapped fiber cement siding on phase 3 as well, but kind of introducing kind of these larger volumes of fiber cement paneling, I think is a bit of a differentiator to this phase.
Okay.
If I may, if I can, I do have both phases, just a quick shot of both of them, just to show you the different color palettes. If the panel does want to see that at all, just because phase 1 did have blue, orange, and red as the main color palettes, and then phase 2 also had red, blue, and then a white palette, as well as a kind of an off orange.
I see. So this is more than just blue and white and gray.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify. I can show you a quick photo if that's helpful.
I don't know if the other members like to see, by all means, but I have other questions. I think it's too long. Mark, how many of the, you mentioned about 1059 square feet to 1500. How many of each do we have? We have 65 units, right? Is it majority on the lower size, higher size? What were we talking about?
Yeah, more on, sorry, let me get to the site plan. Go down here. We get to the site plan here. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. So most of them are on the smaller side for kind of reasons that, sort of Paige was explaining in terms of smaller size and kind of affordability and kind of what the market is kind of wanting there. The larger units are kind of these, the 1,500 square foot ones are a bit more limited. So those are the 2 units on the either side of building number 9, and also the 2 on building number 8. When we made that change, that also reduced the number of units by 2 along the waterfront park, which kind of decreased the density a little bit and also kind of improved sort of side-by-side parking scenarios. But it's more heavily on kind of the smaller units, which I think is a good thing.
Units out of 65 is 1,500. The rest are the smaller size.
Yeah.
And what's the width of these units, the smaller ones?
15 foot wide.
Sorry?
Generally, it's 15 foot wide.
15 foot wide. I see. Thank you. And I didn't see where I missed it. Visitor parkings, where are they located? I could find a couple, but not many. Where are they?
Yeah, so let me zoom in a bit here. So we have a lay-by here with a couple of parking stalls. This is where it's proposed that the car share would be located. And then we've also got visitor stalls here. They're hacked in a similar way to sort of the landscaping. So I think that's kind of a nice, instead of introducing more asphalt, they're kind of, they're dressed up a little bit more. And then there's a stall here. And then there's an accessible stall here as well. And another one over here by the...
How many do we have altogether?
What are we, 7 plus the 5 for the car share?
Car share? No, for the visitor parking.
Yeah, so that car shared would count towards our visitor parking count.
How many? 7?
Yeah.
7. And question from Kerry, is it meeting the requirements for the number of units?
The way the regulation is written, it's to the District of Squamish authority, so they are allowed to offer a car share in exchange for 5 visitors or for 5 stalls. However, it does have to be a car share that's an approved car share program, which the one that we have in Squamish currently doesn't need another car share in this area. So in past, we've made other amendments to allow for that regulation to still be in place. I think staff's comment here is just to see if, you know, more visitor parking is more the preferred route, or if we want to explore other alternatives to, you know, allow for this car share option in the future for when potentially, you know, the demand increases and the car share would like to come into this community. And then maybe get other benefits instead, which is something that we did do for the phase 3B and C.
Exactly. And excuse me, Mark, how many of the units have tandem parking?
Well, there's different forms of tandem. So buildings, buildings 1 through 7. These are all tandem parking stalls in the center. And then the other units, they have 1 stall in the garage and 1 stall on the apron. And then the side-by-side parking is the D unit. So those 4 units, so those wider units that I spoke about before.
So 4 units have side-by-side parking.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding balcony sizes. I assume the width mentioned carries 6 feet. The length, I think it's a unit size, 15 feet, 15 by 6.
Yeah, generally speaking, the ones on buildings 1, 6, and 7 are reduced in width by about 3 feet to allow for that. In that perspective that I showed facing the park, so there's a break in the deck to create a little bit more articulation for those park facing units.
I understand. And if I'm not wrong, you mentioned building number 1, the corner of building number 1 and 7 has 25 feet distance. Is it any possibility to make it about 30, or do you think that's sufficient, 25 feet between these 2 buildings?
Generally speaking, when we've done a lot of townhouse developments and that sort of, often that 30-foot kind of building separation is kind of, held as kind of a bit of a standard.
Right.
We're okay with sort of 25 feet building separation here because it is kind of the corner. Quite often where we have ends of buildings kind of against other buildings, going down to sort of 25 feet or even a bit less kind of works out quite well.
Okay, that's all my question, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzan. I'm just curious, and apologies if you've touched on this already, but are all the decks throughout this phase 6 feet?
Correct.
At this point,
yes.
Or is it just 1, 6, and 7?
No, we're going 6 feet throughout.
Throughout, okay. Okay, and it has been 8 feet typically in the other phases.
That's correct.
Okay. I think I'll wait till comments until I speak to that, but I just wanted to verify. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, then.
Sorry, could I add one more? It's Luke.
Yes, Luke.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you if there's any particular reason that wood wasn't chosen for these buildings. Is it are they over a certain building area and they're required to have non-combustible cladding, or is it just a design choice?
Why wood siding wasn't selected?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think with these types of multifamily developments, it becomes a bit of a maintenance a maintenance item. That's sort of passed on to the homeowner. So I think in my experience, it's quite rare to sort of see any development using kind of a wood siding extensively to as the siding material, just because it is maintenance heavy, and you know, and I'm sure there's sort of underlying, you know, especially with the cost of wood these days, there's a pretty big ticket associated with that, which would probably get passed on to the homeowner as well.
Yep. Okay. No problem. That's pretty much it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Okay, so we are over to comments now. And I'll start with David, please.
Hi. Yes. Thanks for the presentation. For me, I just think there's a lot of areas where this phase in particular is pushing and then maybe colliding into these DPA requirements. And it's not typically where the ADP see a forced response due to type, slope, or setback restrictions. It's not on the side of a cliff, which is necessitating a lot of these changes. The only driver I can really see is that it's one caused by the applicant to kind of densify and get more units. So I sometimes feel it's a little unfair for ADP to have to allow these changes when, you know, removing 7 units would meet all of the current DPA guidelines that are in place for a development like this. So overall, I'd agree with planning that the short driveway for me is not supported. It's neither a driveway or a sidewalk, and I believe that you will get people having to park up on the side to visit friends. I also feel if you are going to densify, you can't reduce visitor parking and reduce driveways at the same time. It's like a triple punch there. So, and the reason I asked about the visits to the reference from existing phases, where all of my visits to this site currently shows really heavy parking use with visitor and driveways full of cars. So I don't know if it's maybe wise to go into subsequent phases reducing visitor and driveways. But I would agree with the open park spaces, considering all the additional amenities that this development does have as a whole. I like the linking of the units and the sidewalks, the sort of routes through the development, which I think is really great and brings a great human scale. And with the exteriors, I understand the need to run a sort of common thread through, and I don't see a problem with the kind of minor material switches. I would agree with planning that I would also like to see sort of less extensive hardy. I think hardy is kind of fairly synonymous with cheaper buildings when used extensively. So there is a time and a place for it if it was used in smaller areas. So maybe there can be some work done for that. But okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. And Kareem, next, please.
Yes, thanks again for the presentation from the team. I agree with David on a couple of items, but I disagree with him. I think this is a kind of a challenging lot. It's kind of awkward in shape, and with the addition of the the pump station at the south, and then you've got 3B and 3C, which are on different grade to the east, and and you're facing a park to the north. It seems like in my opinion, they've tried to accommodate all these different scenarios that are going on. I would be, just thinking about the comment about the shorter driveways. Would we, as panel, would we like them to go to a zero sort of zero length driveway? I personally would caution against that. I think it would be quite, problematic, as the applicant has mentioned. I think, obviously policing might be a bit of an issue, but I find it difficult to park in a 4-foot driveway, even if you're visiting friends or whatever. So this is one point. The other point about the car share, I don't see a problem with it. Things change, and maybe in the future they will need, whether it's Evo or whatever company, goes into Squamish and says we're ready to conduct business here. Then they'll have the infrastructure for it. So I don't see that as a big issue. appreciate the material changes and the certainly the roof outline. I can see this as a one cohesive project linked to phase 1 and phase 2, but you know, you can definitely see that it's independent a little bit and has its own identity with the offset roofs. I do agree though that a little bit more color might be welcome. So that's something that could be looked at. The other comment that I had here, yeah, but no, I think that's it. I don't see a problem with the requests they're making. I support them. That's it from me.
Thanks, Karim. And Brent now, please.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mark and Mike. Yeah, interesting project, and I think sort of dealing with some of the challenges with, you know, balancing what will fit on site and where the district's bylaws are kind of creating opportunities and looking towards the future, but recognizing maybe we're not quite there yet. And for me, I think that the parking challenge with on-site visitor parking, and similar to David, anytime I've been to phase 1, sort of seeing an abundance of parking, I'm torn. I think that there is a balance that needs to be sort of met, and figuring out what that future configuration looks like and how tandem parking spaces are actually used in many of these townhouse complexes, I think is something to consider. That many people in this town have garages full of toys, and it means that maybe their 2 vehicles are spilled out onto strata roads or the other public roads, and those spaces are going to be limited. But that being said, I support the district in moving towards more of a car-light future, and recognizing that creating opportunities for car share and potentially minimizing available parking in a constrained area that's really not going to spill over to other communities is probably a suitable way to do it. So I think I support the car share ask, and I think that's something. The lack of setback and driveway is probably a challenge that I don't support. I think that if a tandem parking space is provided and they're both within the garage, that there needs to be a full driveway or something else. Otherwise, you will see, yeah, a lot of spillover. I like how the site is connected to the paths on all sides, and I really see that as Sea and Sky continues to get built out and the pedestrian or active transportation bridge over to downtown is constructed, that how these spaces are used is going to be quite different, and residents are really going to be back and forth, walking, biking, as there's going to be a time-saving benefit, and that kind of connection between the waterfront park, downtown, and Sea and Sky is going to be really key. And I think that those elements are really important. And so wherever possible, having additional connections, I think is a good thing. And I like that they're kind of dispersed throughout the site. There's a comment from staff about a potential for maybe a water feature. And I like that the promenade sort of staircase down to phase 3BC sort of frames up that space. And I think it'd be a really cool opportunity to integrate some sort of stormwater feature that could sort of create education, create we live in a very coastal climate, and recognizing that many times of the year, it kind of can animate the space and still provide an opportunity for plantings when it's not rainy. Yeah, I think that thinking about pedestrian circulation through the site, sort of back to what David was saying, will also be key as they're balancing where cars is going to be a challenge. It's sort of the color palette. I think looking at the examples in the package, there's some differentiation, but it's a balance that I'm okay with. I think that's sort of enough change, but still providing a connection. Yeah, I think that's everything for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Go to Christina now, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. I think it's a well thought out project, and I really appreciate all of the connectivity, the porosity to all the neighboring developments or phases. The proximity to Waterfront Park, I think, is really key. I like the fact that you've incorporated rain garden, and I think that the idea of having a water feature with those stairs is a great idea, actually, especially also because it could culminate in that rain garden area potentially. I do agree that the parking poses a challenge, and I think, you know, there's that dichotomy between what we'd like to see and what's actually happening. You know, and we do live in an area, Whistler and Squamish, where people tend to drive large vehicles. They pack the vehicles and their garage is full of toys. So, you know, that could potentially be an issue with you know, cars sort of being on the strata roads. Having said that, I think, you know, we have to move forward towards more pedestrian focused future, and this has so much great connectivity to downtown and you know, surrounding amenities. So this very well could be you know, the best case scenario for that kind of thing. And I think adding the car share is a really good idea. In terms of the planting, I think think it's well thought out. I like all the street trees. The one thing I might just ask is, you know, given what's going on and what seems to be going on every summer for us in terms of forest fires, if you might look at Fire Smart in terms of the planting, maybe remove some of the conifers and the tall grasses if you know, that's something that the district has a policy for. I'm not sure if you do at this point. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. And Catherine, next, please.
Hi there. Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. I guess a few comments would be, I do think that in terms of the density and in terms of the, you know, the different variances, I disagree with providing variances. I think if you're going to lose 7 units, but they're more spacious and more livable, and there is more areas for parking, I think I would echo that sentiment in wanting to see that happen. I also think in terms of connectivity, well, actually a couple things. In terms of the paving, especially given what we're seeing with the hotter temperatures and heat domes, I'd consider something called Pure Pave, which is a permeable paving surface. And also I think as we progress into the future where there will be less cars and there'll be more, people are going to have driverless cars and they're going to start sharing cars naturally. It would provide a nicer surface for pedestrian access. And I looking at the district plan, it looked like they were asking for access between building 5 and 8. So I'd recommend creating an access point there as well, because then people could come off the, you know, the more common path and be able to get access that way. And I think it would be a little bit more interesting. The other thing that I want to comment on is just the color palette. I understand that you don't want to mirror exactly what's happening in the other areas, the other phases, but I think black and a lot of black and a lot of white isn't going to age well over time. So I would recommend adding more color accents. I think it'll be more interesting, and especially when we have these gray winters, to have splashes of color, I think is helpful. I like the amphitheater, and I like the pond area and the potential for a water feature and the rain garden. And then the only other thing I was going to suggest was, well, actually, I want to echo thinking about forest fires and planting more deciduous trees. and especially planting deciduous trees that are going to provide shade and cooling for the buildings as well as the common spaces as we move more into these hotter, drier summers. And on that note, in terms of a lawn alternative, there's bee turfs that you can use that fix nitrogen or pollinators, and then there's also the opportunity for a meadow, but I also think considerations around fire have to be considered as well. So that's what I've got. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Catherine. Great. Luke, next, please.
Thanks for the presentation. That was, I think it's actually looking like it's going to be a pretty good addition to the rest of the development. I do have a couple of comments that is basically going to be reiterating what other people have said already. And the first one would be the visitor spaces versus the car sharing. I think that 12 visitor spaces on this site, which is what is generated by the bylaw, would be acceptable, but then to reduce that down to 7, and then further being that there's so many accessible spots which are totally definitely required, but reducing that down to 2 normal spots, then spreading that across 60 odd units, it's just not really going to be enough. It's not really going to cut it. So I'd kind of like to see a couple more added somewhere, but I understand that there are restrictions here with so much crammed into this site. But I'll leave that one there. I do think the roof identity that changing from this phase from the other phases is actually probably almost enough to differentiate it as its own phase. Allow it to relate to the other developments. It would be nice to see in some areas, especially on those rear elevations, a little bit more color added. Black and white color palettes can tend to be a bit more timeless, and it's I also understand the accenting and the careful use of the red and allowing that to pop a bit more. However, it can be quite grey and dull here throughout the certain parts of the season, so it might be just nice to see a little bit of a splash on those opposite elevations. To speak to the lighting, just looking through that lighting plan, it might be worthwhile maybe swapping out a couple of those tree uplighters with maybe more wall-mounted lighting that's potentially on permanently, depending on how that's run by the strata. Or maybe changing that to be more adding more bollard lights, just because we are right there next to the river, be a bit more sensitive to the environment, and also because it isn't such a small residential area, there seems to be quite a large amount of lighting. It might almost be a little bit too much. And then overall, the landscape, I think that looks good. I really like the connectivity through the site and kind of the different narratives that can be experienced depending on which way you want to adventure through there, especially like the rain garden. I think that's a nice touch. There's definitely spots for gathering, which is nice to see even in these areas. I know in these communities people like to come outside and use these areas, and they become of a lot higher importance, especially when people have got such small gardens or none at all. Sorry, I'm just checking the notes I've got here, but I think that's all. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Luke. And Farzan next, please.
Thank you, John. I think the most important issue in this project is parking, as mentioned several times. We don't have enough visitor parking, and we don't have the support of car sharing, and the tandem parking will add to the problem. So that's a big issue. As far as the change of colors and materials, I didn't see the previous one. Kerry mentioned it, but I think we don't have enough consistency. I think it is the gray, 2-tone of gray and red is not enough. It's a bit dull to me. As far as diversity of the units, 2 units of 1,500 and 63 units of 1,059 square feet, I don't think it give us enough diversity. It's just 2 of 1,500 and the rest are the same. I wish there was a little bit more work on the active park use. Just a little bit of landscaping is, I don't think it's enough. I don't mind 6 feet wide balconies. It's fine to me. And what else? That's it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzan. I'm just going to start with obviously the parking. Absolutely agree with everyone else on that. We're seeing major issues in other developments throughout town where visitors can't come to their friends and whatnot. And while we may look towards a future with less cars and more car share and whatnot like that, we need to look at the transition period here and be honest with ourselves. You develop parking stalls now, perhaps in the future they can be infilled into park space or whatnot. But in the interim, it's absolutely necessary until we get better transit infrastructure and whatnot. So I absolutely agree there. I think that's something that definitely needs to be re-looked at on some kind of a redesign. I also think that buildings 1, 6, and 7 are problematic. Following staff's comments in this regard, which are, I think, excellent comments. As far as following our DP guidelines, we do need to, stand firm on a number of things here, just because where do we get pushed to on the next round of development. That being said, 1, 6, and 7, I see people stepping out their what will be the back doors, I imagine, onto public space. And so if you take away some form of exterior options for private space, then I do think the decks should be a little bit bigger to reflect a need for some exterior private space, or a greater need. On the other units surrounding, it looks like they've got small patios outside that are private, so perhaps that works when you have smaller decks. But yeah, building 1, 6, and 7, I would suggest for a number of reasons could do with the redesign. Yeah, and then of course the aprons, the comments from our previous panel members, and I support the fact that those could be problematic and should be looked at once again. Does anyone else have further comments? No. Okay.
I do actually. Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button.
Yeah, no problem.
I just was looking. Sorry, I missed one thing that I didn't put in my notes, which was the smaller. It's in the notes from the district or the staff around the smaller window sizes. Again, I would echo their comments about smaller window sizes, not necessarily letting in natural light and not creating a kind of inviting streetscape for yeah, there's just a lot of building mass. So I would echo their comments about wanting larger windows, but also to have trees for shade and cooling as well as privacy. I think that's and then the other one actually that I didn't comment on was the size of the decks, which again, with the limited outdoor space, I think the deck size needs to be larger. And that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Anyone else? Okay,
sorry. I was going to say one thing. I forgot.
Okay.
I just missed it in my notes for materials. I noticed that there was a lot more focus on this phase given to hardy panel than on the others. I think it was lap siding or something similar. I don't know. I missed this in my questions as well, so I'm not sure which hardy product is proposed to be used. But I was hoping that potentially we could start seeing some better quality materials being used in Squamish, especially when these townhomes are, we're seeing quite high pricing on them. It'd be nice to see some of the materials that are on the buildings reflect that. So potentially the Hardy 2.0 or Reveal panel would be a better one to see, because you see people coming up with these really nice designs, and it just gets flashed to death with having to flash up all the siding on the edges of the panels. And it would just be nice to see, yeah, a decent quality material going on there. That was basically it.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Okay, so now we usually go into the recommendations, which I'll read out, and then we'll talk about. Recommendation A is that the advisor design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B is that the advisor design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C is that the advisor design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project to ADP. And D is that the advisor design panel does not support the project for the following reasons. So open to discussion on some of the key issues and our recommendation. Anyone would like to comment? Yes, Kareem.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there are several issues, obviously, and there seems to be some consensus on them. But I think a B recommendation would be fine. I think they can definitely resolve if it's adding, one or two more parking stalls, or adding some color, or possibly enlarging decks. Like, I think there's I guess enough trust here in planning and in the applicant's team to kind of take it there. I don't personally, I don't think it's necessary to bring them back again, just because I don't think there are enough siting issues. We've been discussing an extra foot here and 2 feet here, and it's not really, I don't see any huge sort of problematic siting problems here, or problematic sort of siting redesigns.
Okay, so I'm just going to put out there that I respectfully disagree with that. I feel that the staff have brought up several significant items and probably like our support in bringing this design through a redesign on several points, in particular adding the parking and addressing other few key issues. I just read that in the staff report, so I would lean towards C, and I would open this to other people to comment.
If I may, if we choose C, it doesn't mean that we don't believe in the planning department that we can resolve it, that they want our support and help. So I go with you, John, that I think I'm more towards C than B.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. I think potentially too, if they're looking at removing 7 units to accommodate some of the recommendations, I'd like to see how they do that. So I'd like to see it come back to us, which I think is C.
Yeah. Anyone else?
David here. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
saying it was between B and C for me, but just seeing the extensive comments from planning and knowing that it was still brought to ADP makes me think that there was maybe, the variances aren't supported by staff and that it's being presented. So I know that they have the capacity to deal with some of these issues, but I think if they do end up changing them, we would like to see it come back if the driveways all change and we do lose units. So, yeah.
Okay, so I think I'll call the question for C, and obviously our key points are parking and some of the issues with the center buildings 1, 6, and 7, following and supporting the staff recommendations in the report. So I'll call the question for C. Anyone against? Kareem is against.
We need a motion and a seconder to move that.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. My bad. So can someone motion for C then, please? Would anyone motion for C?
I'll motion for C.
Catherine, in a second. And who is the second?
Christina, I think.
Christina, okay.
I can second. Sorry, I was muted. I can second
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. And the question for C, anyone against? And I think we noted that Kareem is against. I can't see everyone on my video, so it's hard for me to tell if anyone else is.
John, I can see everyone. No one else seems to have put their hand up.
Okay, thank you, Carrie.
Can I just maybe ask, just for clarity for moving forward for staff here, there were a number of comments that were in support of or not in support of, and it seemed like a bit half and half. So I don't know if there's value in maybe trying to go through some of them just so I can direct which ones we need to focus on in bringing this back.
Were there any in particular that you felt were further discussion?
I think there was a mix of not wanting more color and wanting more color. So maybe a balance is maybe the direction, or. And then
Yeah, that might be one that we leave up to planning.
Okay, and just
Yeah.
the car share one, this one, it will definitely change the site design. So I did hear some mixed comments around needing more visitor parking. And then I did hear a number of comments supporting the keeping the car share option and the less visitor parking. Did I get some guidance or an overall?
I felt that there was definitely more people in favor of the need for visitor parking, and at that point, I mean, we'd all like car share as well, but that's one extra stall, and as you pointed out, there's not support for it right now. So I think the idea here is that we have an issue with lacking in visitor parking for this section of the for this phase of the development.
Okay, and then the last one I have is just the balcony piece. I did hear some people said they were fine, other wanted to increase it.
We can put that out there, but I think there's general support for your comments or for staff's comments in the report, which was towards 8, I believe. And then, and I can only speak for myself, but I do believe that in the cases where there's very little ground level private space, particularly those center buildings, I think you do need some private outdoor space elsewhere.
If I may, John.
Yes.
One option could be, instead of having 15 feet long by 6 feet, you can have portion of it that's 8 by 8 or something like that, that you can locate some chairs and tables and the rest can be 6. So it's a mixture, can be, I think, acceptable.
I think that's a decent suggestion for staff to think about.
And then
Okay, any comments from anyone else?
Yeah, if I may, just with respect to the building color, I think there was only 3 of us that commented on the color, and there was 2 that said they thought there should be more color, and 1 that thought that the color was fine. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, so we can get a sense of where the majority is, if that even matters.
I support color.
It sounded like the staff were supportive of more color. So I don't know how this process works in terms of.
Unless anyone else has a problem with that, I think the leaning is towards more color.
Okay, and I think the last one, I'm just going through my notes here, that would be great to get some clarity on, because I think there was some differing views, is just the driveway length or not. So to try and support the building 7, 6, and 1 to meet the 6-meter driveway, or to keep it, as I believe was spoken to, around the keeping the 4 feet.
I'll defer to our experts on that one from my point of view.
Carrie, can I maybe, it's Brendan here, can I maybe elaborate on your question for points of clarity, just as far as going to the 6 meters or the 4 feet like you talked about? And then the other piece that I think we had the question on was, so 6 meters, 4 feet, or 0 feet as per the bylaw, right? Would be good to know.
John, if I could maybe speak, I think it's all about balance. Myself personally, we're looking for a balance. If it's 4 foot, there should be more visitor parking. If there's 0, there should be even more visitor parking. It's, for me personally, it was just if it's no driveway, no visitor parking, and density, that's not really working for some of us. So I don't think anyone really favors one option over the other in terms of dictating. It's just for the applicant to come up with a balance that works with the DPA guidelines for, visitor parking and site.
Okay.
For me, can't really prescribe something to them.
Yeah, that's a comment I was looking for that I personally agree with anyway, so. Okay, any other comments from the panel? Okay, I think we're good then for this project. Thank you very much to everyone. We look at taking a 10-minute break at this point. And we are right now at 4:06, so we'll return at 4:15. How's that sound? Okay.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Panel meeting, and we are moving to DP 555, which is Lot A, University Heights, and I'll hand over to Brian Daly, our planner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here this afternoon to present DP 555 at Lot A at University Heights. It is a currently unaddressed parcel located off the University Boulevard, just across the bridge over the Masheter Creek. The project was previously presented to ADP at the March 18th, 2021 ADP meeting. ADP passed a motion stating that they would like to see the project come back. The main concerns were providing additional measures for the confidence of public using the access and explore future options to proposed shared arrangement of trail access and separating the trail and the driveway. In the previous proposal, there's an existing public trail running through the property that does not have a public access statutory right-of-way on it. The proposal was to kind of have a shared driveway that would be shared with pedestrians, but there's sort of only visual separation between the two. It was not physically separated. So in response to that, the applicants have provided a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk, which is separated from the drive aisle by a curb that goes through the site and connects to the street. And I'm going to try and keep this very brief, noting that was what the main concern was at the previous ADP meeting. So I'm just going to share my screen here.
Maybe just go to the third slide, Brian. We can just focus on that one. It's the simplest.
Sure. All right, so we're on the third slide here, Chris. And then if you just want me to toggle through, let me know.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'll try to keep this brief. Julian is beside me, so he can follow up with landscape items that pertain to the sidewalk. But basically, in response to your comments, we worked with Binny and the district, knowing there's concerns about maintenance issues, snow removal, and public access through this sidewalk. But the resolution that satisfied both the district from a maintenance standpoint and engineering would be a 1.8 meter wide sidewalk to the downslope or west side of the Strata Road, and going to the downslope west side of the visitor parking, which is at the north end of the site. And the minutia of how that's going to connect to kind of the boulevard and the sidewalk there will be, I think, worked through with Binning, but planning was supportive of this resolution, and that's hopefully really what we're going to focus on today. There really haven't been any other significant changes to the project. There'll be a continuous guardrail / fence protecting kind of fall and maybe providing some lighting to that sidewalk on the downslope side. And we're hoping that probably will stop close to the visitor parking, won't need to go all the way around it. But in general, that's the plan. Yeah, all the other, there's been some minor changes to the east corner where we've removed an encroaching variance. We've just pulled back the facade of the last 2 units and worked through some servicing coordination with the district as well in that corner. But it doesn't affect much that we talked about previously. So really that would be all my comments, Brian, unless there's any other thing you want me to touch on. And I think we'd probably address things with comments and questions a little easier.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think I would just pass it to the panel for questions and comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to suggest that we're going to try and stick to some closed topics here just for speed, but I don't want people to hesitate to bring anything else up that they may have made a comment on the last meeting that didn't necessarily appear in the minutes because the minutes were very abbreviated for this particular meeting. And I can think of a few, but anyway, I'm going to pass it over to everyone for a quick round of questions. And I'm going to start with Farzin, please.
Thank you, John. I don't remember actually this project from the March 2021. So if it is only the issue is the 8 or 6 feet pathway, pedestrian pathway, it seems that I think it needs a plan that is very well designed. So I don't have any comment right now or any question.
Okay, thanks, Farzin. We go to Luke next, please.
Yeah, I wasn't at the last one either, but if just to echo Farzan, if it was just the walkway, it seems to be acceptable. The only thing I can see through a quick look at the drawings, question for you, Chris, would be: is the red line on your site plan, is that a firewall between the 4th and 5th unit?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have? Could you let me know how you're intending on installing the firewall, or have you not got to that point yet?
No, not at this time.
Okay. That is all.
Thank you, Luke. Catherine, are you able to question?
Hi there. I would just the access point seems fine. I just wondered if the developer had considered, instead of just having the buildings in a straight line, if they considered the suggestion of having them offset a little bit so that they're not uniform. That was just my question. And I think it was brought up in the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It was considered. I think it was agreed, internally from the developer's goals for the projects and a lot of the constraints. We removed the variance in that southeast corner, which gave up some significant square footage and kind of buildability in that corner. So to give up or try to adjust, redesign things in a site that was really constrained for vehicle, fire, and pedestrian access, there really wasn't much room for that. So it was considered but not changed.
Okay, thanks so much. That's all I got.
Thanks, Catherine. Go to Christina now, please.
Is it possible to get the site plan back up on the screen? I just want to be clear about what it is that we're talking about. So we're talking about this deeper gray pathway that's running outside of the parallel parking and then along. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep, correct. We basically took width out of a bit of the retaining wall in the Strata Road to make that 1.8 meter sidewalk and curb.
Okay. I'm just curious about it. How do you get, like, what is that edge like? It looks like it just kind of stops, truncates at the property line. Is it just a concrete sidewalk that just ends like that?
It is a concrete sidewalk. Do you mean at the north property line where it would meet the boulevard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Binny, who's our civil engineer. It was in the process of working through that connection along with the alignment of the crosswalk. So we didn't have that as a background for this purpose and thought, I think Brian can speak to this a little more, but the resolution of that, because it's tied to the servicing agreement, will be worked through you know, in later stages of the development permit. But it would continue to the link up to the sidewalk on the boulevard, I would suspect.
Okay, that's great. It just, that clarifies that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christina. Then we go up to Brent, please.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I just had one question of what the proposed fence material or look is. I couldn't see it in the package.
Sure, maybe I'll pass you to Jules. We discussed a few different materials, and I think we're waiting on some feedback from planning from a maintenance perspective, but I'll pass you on to Julian, the landscape architect, who can comment.
Sure, great.
Hi there. So yeah, we're thinking it's obviously going to be an engineered guard because it has to be because of the fall height. So it'll be 42 inches high. But we're looking at various different infills. So possibly WebNet, which is a stainless steel mesh infill panel that we could potentially have climbing plants growing up the other side on. But we're kind of in the process of going through the fine detail on it, really. So we're kind of between there and stainless steel aircraft cable, really. So those are the two kind of ways that we're thinking about things right now.
Okay, that's all for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brent. And we'll go to Kareem, please.
Yep, I just had a single question with regards to the guardrail. You mentioned that it stops right before the visitor parking, and I was wondering why that is.
I think it'd be fine tuned on site with the grading, right? If we're within, say, 16 inches of grade, which would be ideal just for the feel of that sidewalk, and it's not a fall hazard. I think for visual, it'd be more beneficial for the site to not have a guardrail the whole way, and there's quite a bit less steep drop off when we get to that bend by the first visitor parking. So I think in the process of building the main lock block retaining wall and backfilling around the site, the hope is we can bring that grade up a little higher and just not have it go all the way as a full barrier, but have a little more landscape, softer edge condition there. But inevitably, if we have to have a guardrail because of a height condition, we're going to carry it as long as we can.
Got it. So it's due to grading, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. We'll go to David. David, are you ready?
Sorry, I didn't hear David. I heard it. All good. Figured it was me. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something. Is there a retaining wall required on the downhill slope of this sidewalk, or is it just sitting on grade?
There's quite a large retaining wall, lock block wall, retaining the strata road and all the services that are beneath that sewer right of way. So the sidewalk is actually going to go over top of that lock block, which is, let's call it a meter, and extend a little further to get that 1.8. And then we'll bolt the mounting post for that guardrail onto the outside of the lock block. So the nice thing is it will conceal that and give us a nice crisp edge, but the retaining wall will be more or less below the sidewalk.
Okay, so it's not cantilevered over the lock blocks, it just runs to the edge of the lock block and up.
Correct, yeah. Usually they have about a 6-inch kind of curb on the top cap piece of those lock blocks, so you can pour the concrete sidewalk right up against it.
Okay, and then I guess what we're not seeing in this site plan is that there is a tiered lock block wall.
It's not tiered, but they have a slope. It's an inclined retaining wall, but it's not terraced.
Okay. Okay, and then the last one, maybe it's a confusion from my end, is the sidewalk is not allowed to continue into this, what looks like a sphere setback. Because it goes on one side to the property line, but on the other side, it kind of stops to what I think is a sphere setback.
Yes, that's on the left side of the sheet you're looking at, the south side.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's probably going to be a simple, right now there's like a crushed gravel connection to a crushed gravel path, but from a building perspective, we have to stay out of that sphere. So that's where I think on site there'll be a solution with the environmental consultant and the civil and the district we can probably figure out. But from a permitting perspective, we're staying out of that polygon.
Okay, perfect. And the last question would be for Julian. I think in the previous landscape drawings, we saw kind of like yellow markings or something kind of interesting coming into the driveway.
Yeah,
Is that continued? I don't see anything on these plans. Is that gone?
No, the markings have stayed the same. So we're still thinking that there'd be a traffic table there, and then there'd be some sort of graphic painted onto the traffic table. The line that we had as the delineation line will go, obviously, because the curb is and the sidewalk is the delineation now, but we'd still have that graphic at the entrance, which I think would be nice.
Okay, perfect. And actually, one last question. Are you intending to put any planting on that lower portion of lot blocks to kind of...
Yeah, we're looking at it now. I think what we'd like to do is have climbing vines on there that will basically help screen that lot block and potentially get onto the guardrail. So that's kind of what we're looking at the detail of now. What's actually viable.
Okay, perfect. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thanks, David. I'll stay on the sidewalk thing here for the moment. The curb on the inside there, is that a standard hard curb or is it a rollover, or what's the design for that?
Standard hard curve, not a rollover. So separate 6-inch high delineated vehicle curb separating pedestrian.
Yeah, okay, so someone could theoretically back out and have the tailgate of their car over the driveway. Just, I know there's not much we can do about that, and I think you've done great efforts in getting this to work here. So, but I just want to understand that the space that's there and the potential interaction.
Yeah, so it's wider than a standard road width required for fire safety, and it's a standard interface of sidewalk to street. So I think given the number of vehicles there, it would be no different.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's good to know. Okay, so one other question, and this may be for Brian as well, but I just want to bring up once again and to ask to understand how this much density gets down onto this site, in particular necessitating that 10th unit, which is really jammed in there. So if you could somehow go through that with me and how we ended up, in what is a single family neighborhood down at the back corner there, and it's a little bit out of place for, 9 units could possibly be justifiable, but we're getting this 10th one that's causing a bit of pain down at the end there. So is there an answer for that?
Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry. I can take this on, Chris, if you want, or
yeah. No, you go ahead.
It is allowed, like that density is allowed in the UH1 zone. It's 13 units per, I forget the exact, they could have more units on here if it were, a less oddly shaped lot. It meets the requirements of the zoning. Staff did suggest reducing the number of units, but again, when it meets the zoning, we're reviewing an application and it meets the zoning, so the developers are allowed to make applications that meet the zoning, and then if Chris wants to elaborate further on that, he's welcome to.
No, I think that's well stated. Even earlier design iterations of this project had 2 rows of townhomes, one downslope, one upslope. So this is quite a significant pare back, and I think it's quite a tasteful infill when you look at what's there with a giant upslope single family houses and their lock blocks. This is going to really make it a more neighborly scale transition from the boulevard to that UH1 kind of central node of the pump track and the playground, and then back into single family, and then even more townhomes further to the south. So I think it's really appropriate. I'm really happy with the final resolution. There's been a lot of effort by the developer to do some quite tasteful units, both for the livability of the bedroom configuration and the articulation of the sunscreens on the front. I think is quite a step above from what you could see here for townhouse development. So the consolation to remove the variance at the south end was not an easy one, but something we worked through over the past few months. So that's it.
Yeah, That's fair enough, and I appreciate that. I just know that there was a previous iteration of this development that was presented to the community that envisioned these units being further to the north and not so much jammed down in the south end. So that's sort of where I'm coming from on that. Anyway, that goes into comments in a way. I'll ask if anyone has any final questions. No other questions? Okay, then we will move into a quick round of comments, and I'll start once again with Farzan, please.
Thank you, John. I basically don't have any comment. I think it is fine the way it's presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Farzan. Go to Luke next, please.
Yeah, I think it's, I agree with what Chris is saying. I think it's probably a good transitional piece between going up through Garibaldi and getting up into the University Highlands. My one point would be, and it's not really a comment, it's just some advice for Chris, that be careful with the firewall. The detailing is, I'd hate for that requirement to ruin the purity of this design. It's often required to bring them above the roof height by a certain amount of space, and then there's always envelope fun times with that with the engineers. So yeah, I just like to see the purity of this design be realized. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Luke. And Catherine?
Yeah, I've seen this project seems, I think it's a good addition to have some townhomes in the single family home neighborhood. I think the only thing that I take issue with is kind of the uniformity of the line. I know that the site consideration was tight, but I think having things offset a little bit would just be nicer aesthetically. But other than that, it seems like the sidewalk kind of creating that access is they've done a decent job of that. So yeah, that's what I have. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Catherine. And Christina?
I don't really have any comments. I think they did a good job of locating the sidewalk as they were requested to return.
Okay, thank you. Then we go to Brent.
Yeah, similar to the rest of the panel, don't really have any other comments on the project as proposed. Thanks.
Thank you. And Kareem?
Yep, no comments from me. Looks good.
Okay, and then David?
Yeah, no real comments other than I think it's going to be a well-used path.
Okay, and then, yeah, obviously my comment is, well, I do appreciate the efforts for the path and applaud that. Thank you very much. And then obviously, you know, in the capacity of the ADP to look at site circulation and massing and whatnot, I do feel that there could have been something better done here in terms of that 10th unit being so far down there. But I know it's not going to change anything now, so it's just words that have been said. So any final comments from anyone on this one? Okay. Brian, do we need to go through the recommendations once again for this? I don't imagine we should.
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so I'll read it quickly. Recommendation A is that the advisory design panel supports the project and does not need to see this project return for further review. B is that the advisory design panel supports the project in general, would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons. Open to comment. I'm thinking everyone wants A.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so can I have someone move for?
I have a comment just kind of more generally and wondering if
Certainly.
for ADP and sort of recognizing that a project like this, really the only change that has been brought forward is a sidewalk. And I think just as a panel, sort of making sure that when we're requesting a project to come back, it's for substantive changes. And I think that staff are able to handle things that maybe are not quite as critical. And it's just like thinking a little bit more broadly like if there's other changes that were identified, I don't think that there was, but just recognizing, looking to the future, maybe something to consider.
Yes, there were a number of comments in the last one that caused us to want to bring it back. Although the minutes look very sparse, there were a number of things. So, but at this point, I think the major one was obviously the sidewalk, and it was a major redesign that occurred. So that's why it came back. Okay, so would anyone like to move for recommendation A?
I'll move for recommendation A.
Catherine, and a second? David? Okay, anyone against? No one against. So we've adopted that recommendation. And thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate. And Julian.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we sign off to this meeting? Can I have someone move for a termination? Yes. Tarzan, second. Brent, anyone against? And we are terminated. Everyone have a wonderful evening. We're a little early.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Nice work. Thanks, everyone.